What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tara Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, as always. It is October 7th, and I am live taking your questions. And we're going to dive right in, obviously, because we've been getting a lot of questions lately, which has been amazing. We got a couple of mailbag questions in. I already see comments that were submitted before the live, which is perfect. You submitted them before. I'm literally going to jump on those right away. So thank you for that. And then we're going to talk obviously about this week's topic, which is second half breakouts, identifying some players who could have very interesting potential, some underrated potential here in the second half of this season. But I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start answering some questions right away, since we got them already dropped into the chat here. Started off right. Let's see here. Jeff Rogers, Steelers defense or Packers defense, and then Scatabo, Pollard, or Michael Carter at flex. So this one is a tough one between the Steelers and the Packers defense here, because instinctually I want to believe in the Packers defense, but it's tough when they were coming off of, before the bye week, that horrible performance, right, from Dallas, literally tearing them apart. Very disappointing. We've had a lot of high-end defenses that have disappointed lately that I've had to rank high again because of the matchup here. So I do have the Packers defense ranked as my third overall defense this week. I think that consensus, like if I'm looking at Fantasy Pros consensus rankings, they are ranked number one. I don't know if I have the guts to rank them number one, but they're in my top three here. So I would go with them over the Steelers defense. Steelers defense has been creating a ton of turnovers. They're my fifth rated team. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel had a fantastic outing, but it could be a little bit different here against this Cleveland defense. And then between Scatabo, Pollard, and Michael Carter, I believe, and let me double check here. I believe I have Scatabo is the highest in there. Yeah. Where do I have Michael Carter? Yeah, I have Scatabo as the highest in there. I don't mind Michael Carter this week. I am still being like mildly cautious, right? Just because, again, I don't know that Amari DiMercado is going to be the threat after everything that happened there last week. But I don't know if Michael Carter's job security is super duper high. And then at the same time, Indianapolis's defense has been a pretty decent matchup, right? So get a little bit apprehensive. He's still in my low end RB2 range. I feel more comfortable with Scatabo. Even the matchup is less appealing there, just for the main fact that I know volume should lean his way. Even with Tyrone Tracy returning, Scatabo was still getting the vast bulk and kind of trending upwards to being the true RB1 of that offense. So I do still lean Scatabo there, even with the return of Tyrone Tracy Jr. From Henry Odom, got Bowers trying to figure out who to stream while he is out, Njoku, Henry, or Mason. So in that grouping, I have, let me check here. I have David Njoku, the highest of that ranking of those three. So Mason Taylor is the next one that I have up there. Well, actually, no. Hunter Henry is the one that I have highest there. Excuse me on that one. Matchup there. New Orleans, good matchup. New England should dominate that game. For the most part, last week was underwhelming, but Hunter Henry, for the most part, has been very solid there. So yeah, I've got Hunter Henry, then David Njoku, and then Mason Taylor there. What's up? Shout out to Amazon Pancakes. And then from CMAS, would you drop Brashard Smith to pick up Kimani Vidal? I would. And I love Brashard Smith, so take that for what it's worth. He is absolutely wonderful, and I think he's going to carve out a true role within that Chiefs backfield. But the problem is that it'll be a role, and they'll all have roles. It is a three-headed committee. And that's not unusual. We've seen the Chiefs operate in that way. And the good thing is that we know that Andy Reid is more than willing to give volume to the day 3 draft pick rookies, right? That's not a problem. The problem is that they are operating as a committee, and I don't think it's going to change because it has picked up in terms of effectiveness. over the past several weeks there. So yeah, I think it's okay to drop him and go with Vidal because Vidal has at least the chance of being the RB1 there. I do slightly lean towards Haskins, but if Vidal is the one that you got there, yeah, that's the one. If he's available, I would go ahead and make that move. I'm okay with that one right there. From Amazon Pancakes, Taysom Hill worth a sneaky start this week at flex. I would not do it. We are way too deep at tight end, in my opinion. Just because, like, when you look at it right now, and geez, I'm realizing Britton Strange out. Need to remove him from my rankings. But when you look at rankings right now for me, I can go as far as 19 deep and feel comfortable in terms of those kind of starters. My number 19 tight end right now is AJ Barner, who's become just a touchdown magnet in terms of getting targets in the red zone from Sam Darnold. At tight end 17, I've got Jake Tonjes, right? Tight end 16, Harold Fannin Jr., who did see a good little uptick in volume, still behind David Njoku, but a good uptick in volume there with Dylan Gabriel targeting the tight ends more. We got Theo Johnson, Mason Taylor, all guys that are fine streaming options now. So I don't think that we need to dip into the Taysom Hill portion. And when we look at his usage last week, they put him in there for passing plays, which was interesting. So it's not as if we saw him out there operating as the true tight end, right? So we would kind of be depending on him again, being touchdown dependent there in terms of throwing a touchdown pass or getting a run and breaking off a touchdown there. And with the way that they're utilizing both running backs and Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller, I don't know if we're going to go that direction there. Remember, it's Kellen Moore did use him creatively, so that was interesting to see. But at the end of the day, Kellen Moore is a very different person than the prior coaching regime there in New Orleans. So I'm not comfortable with Taysom Hill right now. I've got him rostered like in one deep dynasty league, but I'm not touching it yet. We gotta see. We already did that one from CMAS. From Henry Odom. I need to upgrade at running back. I got Lamb, JSN, Jefferson, Rice. Woo, absolutely stacked. Who should I try to shop around? The one that will get you the most bang for your buck there probably is CD, but I don't want to part with him. The reason for that is, for me, rest of season, CD Lamb has as good of a claim as anyone as being the wide receiver one through the remainder of the season, even with George Pickens. Reasoning for that is that, like, those first two games that we saw before CD got injured, he was hovering around 20 fantasy points there. That was without touchdowns. That was a floor for him. He is operating, or was operating, at a 20-point fantasy floor there. So CD Lamb's upside rest of season, I would have to hold on to him. JSN as well. That's another one who rest of season just extremely high upside. So it would be between Jefferson and Rice in terms of who you want to sell there. I probably would maybe lean towards Jefferson because you've got two solid wide receiver ones in Lamb and JSN, and then a potential one there in Rashee Rice, depending on how it shakes out there with target distribution with him and Xavier Worthy. You can sell Justin Jefferson there and get an extremely high-end running back. So yeah, of that grouping, I would probably sell Jefferson, because ultimately we don't know like what's going to happen, right? When JJ McCarthy does eventually come back, if things were shaky, I have hopes for him. I would like him to do well, but we got to see there. So he actually probably is the one with the most volatility there because of his quarterback situation. From the Tootsie Pop, what's up, Rachel? Do I give up on Jerry Jeudy? He's a drop candidate for me if you have to do it. I had to do it in one league and it was painful. The thing is with Dylan Gabriel, I do think that uptick in volume that we saw to the tight ends, I think that's very much so real, how they're going to design the off. Well, I think that's what Kevin Stefanski wants to do anyway. When he had Jameis Winston previously, right? And that's when we had that offensive explosion of Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman as well. But Jerry Jeudy, where he hit those astronomical levels because we had a quarterback who was pushing the volume aggressively downfield, a prolific deep ball thrower. Interceptions as you will, the man can throw a deep ball out there to any receiver like nobody else. We don't have that in Dylan Gabriel, unfortunately. So, and I don't think, I think Kevin Stefanski let Jameis operate that way because he's Jameis. That's ultimately not what Stefanski wants to do. Stefanski wants the offense to run aggressively through those tight ends. Cleveland has had one of the highest tight end target shares in every single season that Kevin Stefanski has been there. So yeah, we might need to move on from Jerry Jeudy, unfortunately. Isaiah Bond has outperformed him over the past 2 weeks. Cedric Tillman was arguably outperforming Jerry Jeudy before he got injured. I worry for Jerry. I don't think it's his fault. I think it is just the way that Kevin Stefanski's offense works, specifically with Dylan Gabriel and within his capabilities. From Jane Nolan, trading for Henry, who should I offer? JCM, Etienne, or Travis Walker? I'm sorry, not Travis. Travis Etienne or Kenneth Walker there. I would offer JCM, to be quite frankly. To be quite frank, with Etienne, I'm buying into the production that he's had. Last week was obviously a down week. It was not a fantastic matchup. But they won the game. So regardless, but he's still operating as the lead back. He has done very well. He has receiving upside, yards per carry. He's looked fantastic. He just looks like a different back than he was in previous years. And that makes sense because it's such a run-friendly system. It's just a friendly system in general, but it makes sense that Etienne has had this uptick in performance under Liam Cohen. And with Travis, I keep saying Travis Walker. Geez, I keep combining the names. With Kenneth Walker there, the thing about Kenneth Walker is that he is a buy low for me right now. I don't think that because of the perception of Zach Charbonnet stealing goal line touches, unfortunately, it nicks his value to where I don't think you get ultimately fair value out of him. And he's also been incredibly steady, even with Zach Charbonnet getting those lucky snipes. And believe me, a lot of that is luck, right? When a running back breaks off a big run, gets you down to the red zone, often after those big runs, the coaches pull you out for breathers. So he's literally running down to the red zone and then being pulled out for a breather and Charbonnet in and getting the touchdown. It's the worst sniping in the world. It's painful, right? But talent is, he's so talented, right? The yardage is there. He's thriving. There's no issue. He's still getting touches in the red zone, so that's not a major issue. And he has a very safe floor there. So I like Kenneth Walker keeping him. JCM ultimately has been showing incredibly high upside, but I think there is still volatility there, especially as we start to get more mobility from Jane Daniels coming off of that knee injury. So I would lean towards JCM on that one, especially because he's hot, right? I'm going to show this comment because I love this from Johansson. Thank you so much. The comment was she got terabytes of football info. I love that. I had in high school, for some reason, I got like a lot of they became a trend in like one of my classes to give me weird nicknames with the word pterodactyl, terracotta, tiramisu, anything close like that. It was interesting. So terabytes was not used. I like that. Now that was probably because that was quite some time ago that I was in high school and we probably weren't talking about terabytes back then, but that is what it is. I will age myself on that. From Shorty, I have McMillan already and picked up Coker, but I'm nervous about expectations. 2 wide receivers tied to Bryce Young. Is it worth rostering 2 Panthers receivers in this scenario? Probably not. You're right. And individually, I love them both, but tying your fantasy team to both of them, probably not the ideal scenario, but I would say hold for right now, because what could happen there is Coker gets activated. It doesn't seem like it's going to be this week. I don't know. I was hoping it would be this week because it's Dallas and like it would be so wonderful for him to get the opportunity to go off and play his first game against Dallas. That's literally a guaranteed massive uptick. And then you would have built-in automatic trade value. So I say hold because I do think that we can get some trade value out of Jalen Coker. So hold for right now. It's worth rostering him. Ultimately, you don't want to be starting both of them. So if we get into a scenario where Coker is activated, has a strong game, use it as a sell opportunity to get a little something and diversify yourself away from being so tied to the Panthers offense. So yeah, you are correct on that one. From CMAS, would you drop Seattle's defense to pick up any of the following? Tennessee, Jacksonville, or Vegas? It depends on, I would say it depends on how you're doing right now in terms of your record. Because I do have, so when it comes to Seattle, I am ranking them, I think I'm a little bit higher than consensus on Seattle this week because They are what I consider to be an extremely strong unit. I don't want to downgrade them. Last week was obviously awful in terms of the um, offensive onslaught that we had in that game with Tampa Bay. I mean, both defenses got shredded. Seattle had negative points, but prior to that, they had been extremely reliable here. So no, I would hold on to Seattle's defense for me. They're a strong candidate to be someone that you hold rest of season and start rest of season just because of how solid they have been the entire season, and especially against Jacksonville, because it's Jacksonville is great, right, this week, but Trevor will throw some turnovers, so and fumble. So yeah, I would stick with Seattle. From Uncle Ted, buy hella low on Kamara. Yes. Yeah. And if, and I will say this, in terms of a buy low opportunity with Kamara, if you've got a losing record, don't do it, because the concept with us buying low on Kamara right now, and this is someone who rosters Kamara in 2 dynasty leagues and is so irritated right now. The concept of, I've literally just benched him. I'm going to bench him in one of the dynasty leagues this week. I am, which ultimately means that he will go off. So take that for as you will. But the concept with Kamara is that we're holding him because he's a good trade candidate, right? The only thing is his contract is a little potentially apprehensive, but perhaps New Orleans would be okay with eating some of that just to get him off the roster and get some kind of compensation back. Because clearly they're not competing at this point. So when we look at it from that perspective, he really is a good trade candidate. The problem is that we're a solid month away from the NFL trade deadline. So if you are buying low on him and you need to start him because you've got a losing record right now, that's not going to work out for you, because I don't think there's a ton of upside in the near future for him. But if you have a winning record and this is a stash that you're trying to make for like a high-end upside swing, yeah, for sure. I'm okay with that. Before I go on to the next question here, and then we do want to get into some of our buy low trade targets, although technically we have discussed this a little bit here. We are going to take a quick little break to hear a word from our sponsors, and I will be right back shortly after this. After a quick word from our sponsors.
Always have to check in on the Podfather. How's the recovery from the rotator cuff injury coming? Well, it's going great. Playing a round of golf as I did today. Hit him pretty good. Why? The FITBOD app. Because this app creates workout routines specifically for your goals and then tracks your progress and adjusts the workout routine as you build strength, as you build flexibility to ensure that you don't plateau. So if you want to get stronger, if you want to be in better condition, lose weight, recover from an injury, whatever it is, you don't need a personal trainer, because the FITBOD app is calibrated by personal trainers. So go to fitbod.me/player, fitbod.me/player. You get 25% off your subscription, or you can try it free for 7 days. So level up your workout routine now. Join FITBOD today for a personalized workout plan. Try it free for 7 days, 25% off your subscription at fitbod.me/player.
I love that. Fun fact about me. I actually, 5 years ago, became a certified personal trainer because I was super into working out. And when I do stuff, obviously, because you guys see me in fantasy football, when I latch onto something, I like to get very deep in depth and just become like the most expert that I can possibly become on that. It's a weird quirk about me. But it's really tough for me to work out during the fantasy season, during football season, right? Because I'm putting out a lot of content, all this stuff. I also do, stuff with the Mailbag Show, with Player Profiler, Fantasy Pro stuff. I have a live Bleacher Report show. So we stay booked and busy, but it does keep me from getting to the gym. So maybe I need to invest in that. Jumping back to the comments here. Where were we? I think it pushed me down just a tiny bit here. We were at Nathan Neely's comment here, and I'll pick up the pace because we got a lot of comments here. So I'm going to pick up the pace here so we can get through all of this. But we're here for like 30 more minutes here. And then after 30 minutes, you guys know I will be off to catch up on Survivor, and then I will be watching Gen V. So from Nathan Neely, Outlaw did it production. McCroskey Merritt or Woody Marks rest of season. I have a roll. I have to roll with one of them until Bucky gets back and stays healthy. Yeah, and my personal bias on that one is definitely Woody Marks. But I don't know. At this point, I feel like I'm not trusting D'Amico Ryans in that offense, like, to be consistent in terms of, like, I think what happened against Baltimore was that they were experimenting, because we saw an uptick in usage from Dameon Pierce randomly. That was weird. I think that they were just experimenting, and I don't know if I can trust a team that is trying to experiment with their backfield, right? And granted, it was a blowout, so maybe they felt like they could just try different things, but that doesn't make me feel super comfortable there. Woody Marks was still splitting carries. It's just that everyone's workload was just drastically reduced, right? So it was just such a weird game. So I'm not panicked, like, because I've gotten questions about, should we drop Woody Marks? Absolutely not. I would not do that. But rest of season, as of right now, I would go with Krosky Merritt, just because, again, I don't trust Washington to not operate in the committee, but I will say that the competition, no, Nick Chubb doesn't have a lot of pop, right? But, I do think he is much higher competition, right, than that of Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez. So McCroskey Merritt's path towards retaining his RB1 role rest of season is just a lot easier there for him. So, yeah, it is JCM on that one, as much as it pains me. From Henry Odom, what are your thoughts on Rico moving forward versus Hubbard? I will say it was a really good matchup, right? So, and it's not that Chuba Hubbard hasn't had good matchups before, but I don't know if we should automatically jump to think that one excellent performance in a really good matchup is suddenly going to flip a backfield to have Chuba Hubbard lose his job to Rico Dowdle, especially when he outright had it, right? So with Rico Dowdle, one thing is for sure, high-end handcuff, but we knew that, right? We were never skeptical of Rico. We loved Rico, right? We wanted Rico to have more in Dallas. That was frustrating. But ultimately, high-end handcuff there. We trust him as a talent, and there are opportunities. The Panthers remain a very balanced team, despite the fact that they do play from behind a lot. They still remain a very balanced team there. So we shouldn't panic for Hubbard and his role, but it does increase the value there ultimately for some potential standalone value there for Rico, but really just confirming that he is truly a high upside option there. Uncle Ted with a comment here with Kellen Moore won a Super Bowl last year with the tush push. That is relating to the Taysom Hill comment that we talked about earlier about if he is, I'm thinking, is a streaming option this week. Let's see here. From Shorty, what are your thoughts on rostering two quarterbacks in a 12-team single QB league? Most teams roster two, so streaming, picking up in for bye weeks results in only a handful of starting quarterbacks in being available, right? So I roll with whatever my league is doing on that one. My preference is to not roster a second quarterback, but you're right. If your league mate's preference is to roster two, sometimes even three. I've seen sometimes people have three quarterbacks on rosters. If they're playing in that way, you do have to kind of play to what they are doing. Unless you feel comfortable, you've got, a Josh Allen and you don't really need an option because you're just in a bye week. You're willing to take that drop down to whatever is available. Your Bryce Young out there or whatever it is that'll be out there on waivers, right? But yeah, unfortunately, my preference there is to not roster two quarterbacks. But occasionally, depending on how your league is shaping out, you might have to roll with the second one. So I'm not opposed to it if the rest of your league mates are rostering a second option, which can be very frustrating, but sometimes you got to roll with the flow. Comment from Uncle Ted here regarding Isaiah Bond. Isaiah, let's talk about Isaiah Bond here for a second. I actually was not going to talk about Isaiah Bond as one of my second half breakout candidates. I didn't have it listed as a player to talk about, but quite frankly, he is a potential second half breakout candidate there. We talked about it a little earlier. In terms of the fact that he has outperformed Jerry Jeudy and been the best wide receiver. Now, granted, being the best wide receiver in Cleveland's offense right now is, it's amounting to kind of nothing, right? But being that he has been operating as the best leading receiver in that offense right now, we talked about the fact that, unfortunately, we saw the best version of Jerry Jeudy with Jameis Winston, and that makes sense because the best version of Jerry Jeudy is a deep threat, right? And so if you don't have a quarterback that can air it out, you might be DOA right there for Jerry Jeudy, unfortunately. This is not working out for him. Again, Cleveland's offense traditionally, which is interesting because I posted I think it was on TikTok. I posted my, if you guys are on YouTube, you guys are watching on YouTube, my latest YouTube short regarding Joe Flacco and in his role in Cincinnati, right? I talked about how the fact, Chase Brown will benefit. And I had someone comment saying, no, the real beneficiaries are going to be Mike Gesicki and Noah Fant. And I was, my response to that was like, well, it's possible, but we got to pause right there because Joe Flacco benefiting the tight ends in the Cleveland offense was not a function of Joe Flacco. That was a function of how the Cleveland offense operates. Under Kevin Stefanski, we talked about earlier, under Kevin Stefanski, they have been consistently every single year one of the highest rates of targeting tight ends above top 5 every single year. That is just what he likes to do with his offense, right? That's not what Cincinnati does. They target their offense at they target their tight ends at an extremely low rate. It's a viable option when you have a high quarterback in there like Joe Burrow, right? And one of those tight ends has a clear defined edge over the others. But the problem is that one, we have no Joe Burrow, and two, there is no clear edge between Noah Fant and Mike Gesicki, unfortunately. At least we did get the third option of Drew Sample and Tanner Hudson not pushing up in there the way that they were earlier in the season. But they seem to be splitting fairly evenly between Noah Fant and Mike Gesicki. And if they're splitting fairly evenly and they don't target tight ends in that offense at a high rate, I don't think that either one is going to happen there. So, with Isaiah Bond back to Cleveland, he probably benefits. And it'll be interesting to see how it works out when Cedric Tillman comes back. But I think Isaiah Bond benefits from the existence of Dylan Gabriel there. And unfortunately, it hurts Jerry Jeudy a lot. So Bond, who has looked, to his credit, got no offseason work with any team, right? To come in with no work and immediately get that level of play and look as good as he has this early, highly promising. You got to pay attention when rookies are doing that there. So I think there's a ton of potential there for him. Ryan Flournoy, comment by Uncle Ted, who is, with CeeDee Lamb out, he does return to a streaming option this week. I don't know if the matchup is as advantageous as it was in terms of last week's matchup, because the Jets have specifically been extremely, extremely friendly to wide receiver too. So George Pickens having less of reduced targets in that matchup there did make a lot of sense there, but no CeeDee Lamb. Hopefully next week we finally get CeeDee Lamb, because that one's killing me right there. From Shona, Brian Thomas Jr. or Ricky Pearsall in PPR for the rest of the year. Rest of year, I still would have to go with BTJ over Pearsall. And even putting aside, preseason rankings on that one there, ultimately, at some point, probably we were told we were not close on Brandon Ayuk. Now, we have more than likely this week without Ricky, maybe next week. We don't know how this injury is going to shake out. Not a long-term injury, but something that could be 1 to 2 weeks here. Just based off what the injury experts are telling me. Again, I'm not an injury expert. I just retain the information and then share it. But when we're talking about Pearsall rest of season, when we factor in the fact that George Kittle will be back, hopefully next week, cross the fingers, that's another one that I need back. I don't know about you guys, but no Kittle has been a nightmare. And then again, we'll get Brandon Ayuk back at some point, and Jawan Jennings obviously will still be there. And then Christian McCaffrey and his 10 plus targets. It's a lot of mouths to feed. So Brian Thomas Jr. just naturally has less competition. We've seen, some improvement from Travis Hunter. He looks fine, but ultimately, just not anyone really trying to steal Brian Thomas Jr.'s spot here. He just needs to have a little bit of personal improvement there to get to the version of him that we saw last season. So still BTJ for me. From Brandon J, needs some flex appeal. Pittman or ETN, both of whom I love. Pittman I have, so let's see, ETN I have ranked as my RB16 this week. And I don't know if you said it was PPR or not. And then Pittman I have, that's ironic. Pittman I have as my wide receiver 16 this week. My lean is towards Pittman on this one. Seattle's matchup, Seattle's defense has been, which is for Travis Etienne. Seattle's defense has been very strong against the run. Obviously, Rachaad White had a fantastic game, but it wasn't as if he was popping off on the ground, right? But they've been very strong on the ground. Pittman against Arizona, it's just a very advantageous matchup there. Arizona's defense has been reeling a little bit there, so we lean Pittman there. From Easy, do you think Tennessee offense has figured out how to use Ridley? They claim they have, and they claim they're going to try and figure out how to get the ball to him more, which is weird because I don't know how you have to figure it out, right? He's the wide receiver 1. You just got to put some targets towards him. You don't have to get creative with it. It's not like DJ Moore where they were talking about in Chicago. We got to figure out ways to get him the ball, and you're giving him, now he's running the ball. That's different. Calvin Ridley it's strictly a receiver there, so all you got to do is just push some targets his way. It's not that hard. I feel so. I'm hesitant this week. I'm still a little hesitant. Now, granted, I don't dislike the matchup here. I still have Ridley ranked as a mid-tier, kind of to low-end wide receiver thief, fine flex option. Vegas's defense has been very beatable, right? Not giving a ton of volume to opposing quarterbacks, but very efficient there. So Ridley is still a fine flex option this week. Really for them is that it was good to see him move. I was worried that he was washed, right? I hate to apply that to players, but once you hit 30 and you appear to be struggling to outperform the younger receiver, you start to wonder, like, oops, is he potentially hit an age cliff there? But he looked good. We just got to get more volume for Cam Ward. And the good thing is that we're going to get on a nice streak of, better matchups, right? Because the beginning of the season has been brutal for Cam Ward. It's, not been a good schedule for him, unfortunately, here. So it was good to see that improvement. Still, obviously, there was a lot of messiness in that game, a lot of funny messiness. But the final drive there was just highly impressive. And he's looked competent, as competent as you can be in what is clearly an incompetent offense. So I do have some faith that we could see a back half. It's weird to say back half breakout for a 30-year-old receiver, but technically speaking, a back half breakout for Calvin Ridley to return to what he has been traditionally there, what we thought he was going to be. From KJ Frederick, start 2, Hendo, Sharps, Vidal, Kendre Miller, RJ Harvey, full PPR. I am going to have to go to my rankings because I don't want to lie to you about the order. I'm 99% sure that it would be Charbonnet and Henderson, but I'm not entirely sure where I have Harvey in all of that. Okay, so I have Charbonnet. Charbonnet, where are you? You are my RB 31. And then Henderson is my RB 30. Well, that's cute. 30 and 31. Vidal and Harvey are 36 and 37. And then Kendre, where are you at, Kendre? Kendre is 38. So yeah, as I thought, it's Sharbs and Henderson. I'm prepared to get hurt on Travion Henderson. I hate to see running back injuries. Poor Antonio Gibson. But again, I do fear that it is going to be Ramondre Stevenson as the RB1. And obviously we have seen that New England doesn't particularly care to punish him after the fumbles, which is a choice, but that's their choice. But at least we have the backfield hopefully whittled down to 2 specific players, which makes it at least a less messy committee there. So I can at least lean into Henderson as a flex play this week. So yeah, it's Henderson and then Sharps for me. I mean, the goal line touches have been consistent, so he is relatively safe flex option. Those are the two, especially in full PPR. In theory, Vidal should get some ups in full PPR, but again, that is theory. That backfield can go a wide variety of different ways there. Interesting thing about that backfield, I've had a lot of comments because I was talking about Hassan Haskins and Kimani Vidal in several videos, and I've had a lot of people commenting, what about Nyheim Hines? And I know we love Nyheim Hines and we want the best for him, right, in terms of being able to make a comeback, but we haven't seen that man since 2022, like at all, like legitimately has not played a snap, and that is a lot. That's a lot. So yeah, he was on the practice squad. He has familiarity, but it's very different. Like I talk about Nick Chubb a lot in terms of we haven't seen a full season from Nick Chubb since 2022, but at least he has actually played in all of the subsequent seasons. They just haven't been complete seasons because he's been injured. Nyheim Hines hadn't played since 2020 or 2022. So yeah, that's a wee bit of a problem there. And even then, so it wasn't as if he was a starter in any capacity, or it was back in Buffalo. Like I get it that we've got some in the fantasy community, we've got some partiality to him because unfortunately he just went through untimely injuries and accidents, right? So we want the best for him, but I don't know that he's the one that is going to pop out of that one. It's Haskins or Vidal for me for sure. That was my long-winded way of working in more information about the Chargers backfield for the purposes of this live. From Keith, trade Rome or DJ Moore for Chase Brown. It would definitely be DJ Moore for sure. Definitely not Rome. But Rome is, and granted, I think that last game was, it's tough because we had the bye week before, but I think that last game was a little bit underwhelming from him. But Rome has been operating as the wide receiver 1 there. I don't think it's going to change. He is tracked on this JSN path. It was the low-hanging fruit that we said of him being the 2025 version of JSN, and that's legit what happened. So he's taken over as the wide receiver 1. If you can trade DJ Moore for Chase Brown, I would love that. Moore's floor has been the same thing as a ceiling. Unfortunately, there's just not, there's so many mouths to feed in that offense. Rome is dominating. He looks incredible. They're trying to find ways to get DJ Moore involved, but it's not happening. Unfortunately, Caleb Williams throws for high volume there. So, I mean, again, he has a safe floor. But ultimately I think he is a fine trade option. And for Chase Brown, again, if we're talking about back half breakout potential here, again, we could have an increase of back half production here. Hopefully, cross our fingers with Joe Flacco in Cincinnati now, because again, when you look at so with Henderson, Chase Brown, my concern was that we were going to see less effectiveness with checkdowns, and that's exactly what happened with Jake Browning. It'll be interesting to see if the effectiveness is a Brown issue or Jake Browning's issue. But Joe Flacco has done very well with connecting with players in checkdowns. Had a lot of success with Dylan Sampson earlier in the year, Jerome Ford as well. So I feel good about him being very check down friendly for Chase Brown here. Possibly helping out with some receiving touchdowns would be amazing. Chase Brown needs those receiving touchdowns. So back half potential here for Chase Brown is back on the table. I do like him as a potential buy right now. For Easy E, heard Seattle's defense had a lot of injured players last week. But again, I still, overall, the scheme, their talent, I do think they're rather deep because they have been drafting aggressively on defense, which was interesting, right? Because they prior, like this year, they did take a linemen in the first round, which was what they needed. But in prior years, they were very focused on taking best available, and that was often a defensive player. So I feel like they're extremely deep at defense. So I'm not super concerned for them. From Miami Martian, good evening. Set my lineup. Start, sit, flex. I'm 2 and 3. Hurts / Love. Okay, so Hurts / Love. We're still going to go with Hurts on that one. Love obviously has a good matchup here, but I do still lean towards Jalen Hurts ultimately. Then running back, we've got Barkley, Cook, Javonte Williams, and Quinshad Judkins. That is a tough one because now Cook's obviously last performance was very underwhelming, but prior to that, he had been extremely reliable. Javonte obviously has been, sometimes a little slightly underwhelming depending on the matchup, but for the most part, an incredibly safe and high upside guy. And then Judkins has been just truly prolific on the ground at this point. I don't use that word lightly. The talent is really shining through with him. That said, I would still lean towards starting both Barkley and Cook on that one. Especially since we are due for Cook bounce back game here. And then wide receivers, Adunze, QJ, Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, Pittman. Assuming that there's 2 and then we want to decide on the flex there. Definitely for sure Adunze and Garrett Wilson. And then your flex option between the running backs and then QJ and Michael Pittman. I want to double check where I have QJ ranked right here because I lean towards, especially if this is PPR, I do lean towards going with a wide receiver for that. I have Pittman slightly higher than QJ. Quentin Johnson is limited with a hamstring injury, so that's something to monitor on that one. Probably if we don't get the full clear and practice in full, that would definitely make me lean towards Pittman on that for your flex option. And then I would go with Laporta. You have Laporta, Pitts, and Mason for your tight end. I would go with Laporta. And then Colts defense currently, yep. And then McManus or Myers. I want to say Myers higher this week. Yeah, I have Myers higher this week. So that is what I would go with. From CMass, how much longer would you hold like Horton, Franklin, and Golden? So in the order of preference for me holding them, it's Golden, Franklin, and then Horton. Golden because he has the highest upside opportunity, right, for the potential there to be the wide receiver 1 at some point potentially. I mean, we've seen, like, think of an Amon-Ra St. Brown became the wide receiver 1 in his rookie season in the back half after a very slow start there. So it's still possible there for Golden. Troy Franklin, I do really like over Torrey Horton, even though Horton is extremely electric, right? Talent wise, might be a little bit higher than Franklin, right? But when it comes to Franklin, I do think he is solidified as the wide receiver 2 in that offense. I don't think he needs to overcome anyone. Horton's got to overcome Cooper Kupp there, which can happen fairly easily. But I lean that direction in terms of holding all 3 of them are worth it. But my preference there is Golden, and then Franklin is the holds, and then Horton is the last one, but still very worth a hold. From Riz with the, thank you. Riz sent $9.99. I appreciate that. This is actually the first time that I have super chats and gifts activated here. So Riz, you were officially the first person who has done a super chat or a super thanks. So you're special there. Shout out to Riz. Thank you so much for that. From KJ Frederick, better flex, start BTJ or Jacoby Myers, full PPR. For sure, BTJ. BTJ, obviously very frustrating, but Jacoby Myers there, I'm high-key concerned about, right? Big reason that I am high-key concerned about Jacoby Myers there is that the floor and the ceiling have been the same thing. I said that about someone else earlier. The floor and the ceiling have been the exact same thing for him. After week 1, right? That was a fantastic, very strong performance, right? After that, things have gotten very mediocre for him, unfortunately. I think Geno just leans towards Trey Tucker. Personally, when I'm doing like apples to apples, the fact that Jakobi Meyers didn't have some kind of higher end performance there in this matchup, which is a good matchup, and then with the prior week 4 was a good matchup, and then week 5, no Brock Bowers, and you couldn't really break through then. High-key concerned about that one. At least I know that BTJ ultimately has upside. I do not know that for sure, unfortunately, there about Jakobi Meyers, unfortunately. Another super chat there from Hammond H. Thank you. From Kendre Miller or Brashard Smith, who is the good stash. On that one, talked about Brashard Smith a little bit earlier there. With Brashard Smith, the thing is that I love him deeply. And the upside, at least in PPR, is good because of the pass catching opportunities. The reality is for Kendre Miller, he ultimately has the easier path to becoming the RB1 there. So Miller is the one that I prefer to stash because while I do think that I believe in Brashard Smith more than I believe in Kendre Miller, but opportunity is much higher there for Kendre Miller. Reality is that Kansas City has essentially been operating in a committee for the past 2 seasons, right? This one and last. Once they started integrating Kareem Hunt, they don't seem to be acquiescing off of that, and that it's going to change. So it's a 3-headed monster there, and I don't know if we want a massive piece of that. Thank you, by the way, for the super chat. Getting back here to the comments from Jeff Rogers. Should I drop Scary Terry or hold him for the stretch run? We got to hold right now. Terry has been not just highly disappointing, overall just really frustrating, right? Because you hate to see it. I guess that's why we say fear the guys that are arguing over contracts. Hey, I guess that applies to Jakobi Meyers too. The difference is Meyers didn't get paid. And it's not a 1-for-1 thing, right? Because James Cook, had, arguments over the contract, but at least he did end up showing up and got that resolved very, very quickly. These guys, when they have these contracts that linger up right until the season kicks off, unfortunately, we're counting on them because they haven't been on the team to have prepped properly, right? They haven't been with the team to prep properly for the season. And unfortunately, I just have so little confidence in Terry right now. We're holding him, right? Because again, he's Terry McLaurin, and we saw what Jaden Daniels did for him last year. So we're still holding on, but it's so incredibly frustrating here. G Mike, what is your take on potential running back trades before the deadline? Thanks. So Kamara is definitely my number 1 there. Again, the contract might be a little bit of an issue with him because the contract is not too bad this year, but next year it is a little bit hefty in terms of the dead cap. I was looking at that. But so New Orleans would have to take on some stuff, right? To maybe make it kind of a fair situation, right? But I still think that he is a good candidate there. A lot of people previously said Breece Hall was the top candidate for the trade. I think with Braylon Allen going down, even with them being very unsuccessful right now, I don't know if we're going to see it. Now, granted, the reasoning for him being a potential trade candidate there is the fact that they can get something out of him now because he is obviously in a contract year. Now, granted, we always got to remember that, it's not expensive to franchise tag running backs. So when you have running backs in the final year of their contract, don't think that necessarily they have to get traded because it's extremely cheap theoretically to franchise tag these guys. That's what we saw with Josh Jacobs. So that's my potential right there. It's Alvin Kamara who I think has the highest potential to get traded there. From Miami Martian. Oh no, we did that one. We did your lineup. From Easy E, I have been so tired of Jacksonville not getting enough plays for BTJ. Traded him for Godwin, especially since their offense is too spread out. Yeah, I don't blame you on that one. I still prefer BTJ just because when it comes to Godwin, again, we've got this ramp up that until he gets back to his normal self, he's operating in terms of, snap counts and targets and whatnot with no issue, right? But again, as the injury experts say, it takes them, several weeks, sometimes up to a month, to fully get back to their actual full capabilities in terms of how they present on the field. So we might see the better version of Godwin in 3 weeks or so. But yeah, the usage of BTJ has been incredibly frustrating. From Russell Pace, what do I do with Lad McConkey? Should I hang on to him? If you can trade him off of this game, because that's been, the one shining spot. Maybe we can finally have a trade opportunity there. And I think a lot of people have been low-key trying to buy low on him. So I think it's a possibility to get some value out of him. He's a trade candidate for me. You don't have to sell him at bottom dollar, but I think now might be a good opportunity to get out on him, because the problem with him again there is that I do think that he's just simply been outperformed by Quentin Johnston, and Keenan Allen is just ultimately the better receiver than him. The only difference there is just age. Can take Keenan Allen at any time. But outside of that, I think he's a fine trade candidate there. From Easy E, oh, thank you for the super chat here. Appreciate it. Green Bay or New England defense rest of season. So New England's defense heavily depends on, weirdly enough, Christian Gonzalez, I think, in terms of their upside and stability. They invested a lot into their defense. So ultimately, I do think that in the long run, New England is probably the better option to hold. Obviously, when we look at Green Bay's defense, weeks 1 and 2, they looked fantastic. Week 3, they looked fine, but hey, it was against Cleveland. You could look fine against Cleveland. It's whatever. Week 4, they got shredded by Dallas. I think we're going to learn a lot about Green Bay's defense this week. My preference ultimately is New England, just because their schedule is a lot softer. Not in the playoff schedule, unfortunately. Their playoff schedule is Buffalo, Baltimore, and the Jets. So you got one reprieval there in championship week. So there's a time period on it that you'll have to bail out and get some other for the fantasy playoffs. But the interim there, they've got layup after layup after layup, with Tampa Bay being the only difficult matchup that they have here. So New England is got a nice little setup here. Moving back to, and by the way, thank you for the super chat, guys. I really appreciate it. And also thank you for the positive comments and liking the videos and encouraging likes and shares. That is awesome. Thank you so much. We did Lad McConkey. So let's go to Anthony Jones. Drop Zach Charbonnet for Kendre Miller. Heard Kamara has an ankle injury. Yeah, they said the ankle injury is a day-to-day, avoided a serious injury. Now, granted, that does mean, even when it's day-to-day, an avoided serious injury, yeah, that indicates, okay, probably not an IR situation, but that could still mean that he may be out this week. So, Kendre Miller could have high upside here. I don't know if I want to drop Charbonnet, just because Kenneth Walker has also had an injury history of missing several games, a couple of games in a season and whatnot. And Charbonnet offers standalone value that's higher than Kendre Miller. If you need a spot start and you need to do that and pick up Kendre Miller, then yes. But otherwise, apples to apples, I would still want to hold on to Zach Charbonnet over him. KJ Frederickson, hopefully Mixon can come back this season. So we got that update that, in a few weeks, they said in a few weeks, we'll have a better idea of where he's at. I'm still concerned that he's not on the field, right? Because when we look at guys that are coming back, like we saw Godwin on the field, we see Christian Watson on the field, we see Brandon Ayuk on the field. We don't see Joe Mixon anywhere. So we haven't seen him on a field all off season. So I'm high key concerned about him there, unfortunately. Amazon Pancakes, is it too risky dropping Trey Benson because he's only out 4 to 6 weeks? I'm down Bucky and no, you're down Benson, Bucky, and Hampton, starting Rico, Mason. Wow. I would try to trade him. Ultimately, though, you're going to have to target somebody who is in a, excellent position in terms of a record that doesn't need Benson as a starter. Because ultimately, when we look at the draft capital invested, the way that they spoke in the offseason, Trey Benson is their RB1 of the future. So assuming when he comes back, he will be the RB1, but you're in a rough spot here. So you do have to get rid of somebody. So I would try to at least sell Benson for something. But yeah, unfortunately, you gotta make a move there. Oh no, I hate that. From Burn, Juwan or Shakir rest of season? Juwan for sure. Juwan for sure. Once he's been banged up with 5,000 injuries, but much higher upside, regardless of even Brandon Ayuk coming back there. Thank you, Easy E, telling people to hit the thumbs up. I appreciate that. We are rocking and rolling on this YouTube channel here. From Nihal Nijar, Travion and Carter for JCM. You know, I'm not mad at that, honestly. Because, JCM, again, I think I talked about it earlier in the live, JCM, I think we did compare those two. Probably has the much higher chance of just being the flat out RB1 of that committee than Travion has of pushing Ramondre Stevenson out. We've got just years of examples of Josh McDaniels and his love of committees. And no matter what Ramondre does, he forgives him, which I believe that Josh McDaniels would have been on the Patriots when they drafted Ramondre Stevenson. So maybe that has something to do with it. Actually, I have not looked that up, but I think timeline wise, that does make sense. So yeah, I don't mind that at all. You capitalize off of Carter, right? Because long-term at some point, we were just talking about Benson. At some point, Benson will be back as the RB1 there. And then with Travion, yeah, you're getting out of that weird committee. So I'm not mad at that trade at all, for sure. Yeah, we talked about Alvin Kamara and the ankle injury and if he can get traded, a buy low opportunity. Part of me wonders if the ankle injury, I don't think we have any more ads. I can take out my earpiece. Part of me wonders if with the ankle injury, if we get into a weird situation where this might be them shutting him down. We've seen it before, like where you get an injury, but it's not really an injury and they're just shutting him down for trade. So you're right. That could be our little trigger point here for sure. Pay attention to that. Anthony Lopez, need the W, flex, Kenneth Walker or Scatabo. I would go with Kenneth Walker. Again, ultimately, even, and I don't think that Tyrone Tracy is going to be a major threat to Scatabo. But Walker has the higher upside regardless, even with the presence of Zach Charbonnet for sure. From Ella, speaking of 30-year-old wide receivers, save me Demarcus Robinson. I really thought that Demarcus Robinson would have a better game than that because as much as ride or die you can be for Demarcus Robinson, was super pro Demarcus Robinson for the past 2 seasons because of what he kept doing in LA. Whenever somebody would go down with an injury, Demarcus Robinson would pop up and give us some touchdowns. Yeah, Demarcus, can you please step up here for us, please? We got a super chat here from Paul Gregory. Thank you very much. Do you think Kendrick Bourne or Ryan Flournoy can repeat last week's performance? That's perfect because we were just talking about Demarcus Robinson. I wish at the time of this, for people that are listening on the podcast version, obviously you probably know the health of Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall by the time you're listening to this podcast. So I wish we knew as we're sitting here talking. But yeah, if for Kendrick Bourne specifically, I believe that all it takes is for either one of Ricky Pearsall or Jawan Jennings to be out this week. Jawan is the question mark. It does look like it's leaning towards Ricky. He's probably not going to play this week. Have they officially ruled him out? Let me double check. Ricky, where are you at? No, we're still unknown on Ricky. But my thought is that just based off the injuries that happened to both of them, that Ricky's was the one that would potentially hold him out this week, more than likely. So if one of them is out, Kendrick Bourne is definitely my preferred streaming option there between him and Flournoy. Flournoy is interesting, though, but I fear that might have been matchup. I talked about it a little bit earlier. It was against the Jets. The Jets have been specifically very friendly to wide receiver twos. So that does make a lot of sense, right? That he had a blow-up game there. But it was interesting to see because Jalen Tolbert was on the field more, but just didn't garner the attention. in terms of targets that Flournoy got. So my preference there is definitely Kendrick Bourne. I think he's a real viable option this week if one of those guys is out for sure. Let's see here. Justin Molina, flex, Cup or Keon? Cup. Keon getting the touchdown was cool, but again, outside of that touchdown, it's been a little rough over the past several weeks for him. I feel a little bit safer with Cooper Cup. Ride some waves, start Tesla. No, unfortunately, only wide receiver. Where we start our running backs there in Detroit. We start Amon-Ra and then Sam Laporta. Unfortunately, at this point, even Jameson Williams has become too risky for me. And yeah, we get the touchdown possibility there for Isaac Tesla, apparently in the blowout games when they're putting him in, and he gets those fun little design plays. And he's so talented. I wish that Isaac Tesla was anywhere else. Can you imagine him in New England, opposite of Stephon Diggs with Drake May? That would be a lovely combination there. Would love to see it. But unfortunately, he's buried there, unfortunately, in Detroit. So no, touchdown dependent, unfortunately. From Gwen P. Would you trade Scattaboo for JCM? I would. Yeah, I like that for you. I would. I prefer the JCM side of that. Again, Scattaboo has been solid. And I think he retains that RB1 role. But, you can't help but wonder to what degree Tyrone Tracy is going to poke in on that one. And Tyrone Tracy is definitely, I would consider him more talented than Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols for sure. From Patrick, Stash Davis over Brashard with Brees trade chatter. Yeah, I think I would at this point. We do have the trade chatter, although I still hesitate a little bit on, but again, he is a really good trade candidate for sure. They'd just be so thin at running back. But yeah, I think I lean towards Isaiah Davis again, because it just straight up easier path there for sure. From D. Smitty, my RBs are Monty, Rachaad White, Travion Henderson, and Marks. Is Breece Hall a good trade? Is Breece Hall a good RB to trade for? Yes. Yeah. Especially because, so for right now, you're good. Right? Monty is solid, right? Rachaad White right now gives you RB1 upside. We don't know the exact timeline there on Bucky Irving, unfortunately, for you. But for right now, you're solid. But trading for Breece Hall would be a really good move for you. From Miami Martian, awesome. You will be running that lineup in full PPR, by the way. If QJ is good, you're good to go with him or Pittman. Yeah, if QJ is good, and I want him in good, I want him to practice in full, either tomorrow or Friday. If he's limited in terms of practice, and I just go look at the practice reports. Just type practice report in Google, and there's some websites that give you each team's practice reports for every single day. If the practice report says he's limited on Friday, then no, just go with Pittman and don't risk it. Even if they end up saying on like Saturday, okay, he's expected to play or something like that. Nah, you got to give me a full practice on Friday for me to go there with QJ over Pittman. So yeah, yep. Oh no, which kicker would you go with? Lost Schrader. I am really bad at tracking kicker roster percentages. Unfortunately, I genuinely just don't pay attention to the roster percentages, but I will say that perhaps, can I see the roster? I'm looking at my rankings and trying to see if I can see roster percentages. No, I would have to go and open up one of the roster percentage websites. I think I would probably lean towards, let's see, what's a lower end one that has some upside there? Maybe, I don't think Cairo Santos is that high rostered. Actually, I can check here for you in a second. Is Cairo? No, Cairo is super low. He is definitely available. Or you could go with, let's see, Cam Little is one that you could go with. Perhaps Tyler Loop might be available in your leagues. Those are one of the ones that I would go with that are below 50% rostered. Cairo is 1% rostered. Geez, but it's a matchup where I do think there should be a lot of field goal opportunities. From Ernie, Taurus wishing I did that one. Yeah, Jawan or Shakir rest of season. All these Jawans are driving me crazy. I can't have God forbid there's one more Jawan added in, especially the different like spellings here. I can't handle one more Jawan Jennings. I can't handle any more Jacksons with the X's. Or I'm good. Like just no more. You're gonna confuse the hell out of me on that one. Yeah, easy. Lots of chats and lots of people in the chat and lots of likes would be awesome. So yeah, if you could like the live, that would be amazing. I would super appreciate that. Yeah, from Mar, the ankle injury on Kamara, they say is minor. From Trone, Force, 4-1. Nice. Congratulations. Wanted to upgrade at wide receiver, traded DK and White for Nico Collins. Decent trade. I like that a lot. You're capitalizing off of White's value right now. DK obviously has high upside in matchups where they push volume and he can get that direct target funneling. But at the end of the day, that breakout was fantastic, but it's tough to ignore the fact that DK had mediocre production prior to that, and that the Steelers don't want to be a pass-heavy offense, even though Aaron, like no problem with Aaron, right? I think he's still got it. But the Steelers don't want to be a pass-heavy offense, right? They want to be very balanced. They want to lean on the run there, not have to force a lot of high volume back and forth there, rely on their defense to keep things close. So yeah, I think, you've got Nico. So you've got a clear wide receiver 1 and you needed that for sure with some upside there. Yeah, I like that a lot for you. Shout out to Best Ball on the call, showing some love. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Shout out to In Torin. Thank you for joining in. Bob Hope, question, Pitts or Taylor PPR in my flex, Sutton or Myers, or Pitts or Taylor in PPR, Taylor. Yeah. And then in flex, Sutton or Myers or Swift. Sutton for sure. Yeah, very pro Sutton on that one. Again, sometimes there are games where the matchup is tough and there are other options they can go to, but Myers is definitely the one that I feel the most comfortable with. It definitely has the highest ceiling of those guys too. From Intorin, hoping to trade JSN, 10-team league, half PPR, half Pickens, T-Mac, QJ, BTJ, Devontae Smith, and RBs are CMC, Devontae, Hampton, IR, Mason, Carter, Miller, Benson. You got a nice, hey, it's an injured room, but it's a nice and well-stacked room for sure, for sure. And then Warren and Kittle are you're stacked at tight end. And then you got May at QB, who I think is fine rest of season. I lean towards, oh my gosh, we're over an hour now. All right, let me pick this up so I can get all of our questions going. I lean toward, trading for JSN for sure. I think will for sure upgrade your team because you're sliding good right now with Pickens. But obviously in those games where CeeDee Lamb comes back, he's going to be touchdown dependent there. So yeah, if you want to offload any combination of, maybe one of those receivers and an injured running back or something like that, or any of them running. Yeah, I think that's the right move for you to try and trade and target for JSN for sure. Yeah, especially if you're 2 and 3. Yeah, move what you have to get him an upgrade. Thank you, Gwen P, for the super chat. Really appreciate that. White over Warren. Ooh, half PPR this week. And then half PPR, Hendo, Haskins, or Gainwell. Other RBs are Judkins, Barkley, Gordon, and Tootin. And then McManus is hurt. Gay gone. Drop. You have to drop one of them you want to drop one of them for Bourne, and you have Pearsall. Yeah, Bourne, if Pearsall is out, again, Bourne on that one is a good streaming option if you need an option there at wide receiver. So for White over Warren, yes. And again, have we had the practice report there from, I was looking at it earlier. Do I have a practice report for Pittsburgh? Jalen Warren was good. Not on it at all. Full practice. There we go. Full practice. So we're good. I still lean towards White over Warren. Warren's very solid, a nice safe play for me for sure. But White, I think, again, higher upside play for sure. So White is my preference there. And then between Hendo, Haskins, and Gainwell, And I assume you're starting Judkins and Barkley there. Between Hendo, Haskins, and Gainwell, I kind of feel like I would rather go with the safety of Henderson there. Again, Warren is playing, so Gainwell does have some standalone value, but a little bit capped in terms of upside there with Warren healthy. And then between Henderson and Haskins could have the lead back role and be fine, or it could be a situation where we get Amari Mercado'd on that one and it's Vidal that has the lead role. I think it's going to be more of a split committee and lean slightly towards Haskins, but just forego that and go ahead with Henderson. Obviously, that committee there with Ramondre Stevenson is frustrating, but at least it's been dwindled down to 2 there. So Henderson is my preference there. Thank you for the super chat. From Flash Jordan, my RBs are JT, KW3, Scattaboo. What can I get for, or who can I get for KW3 and Scattaboo? So Kenneth Walker is a top 20 back rest of season for me. So if you're trading both him and Scattaboo, I want to upgrade to someone who is going to be a consistent borderline RB1. My preference there would be maybe to lean towards a Kyren Williams, right? A Devon Achane, perhaps. Who else is, maybe someone, and this one is lofty. I don't know if you can get there. But I was going to say, James Cook coming off with a bad game there, but that one's a little lofty there. I'd probably target towards Achane or Kyren Williams or like a Javonte Williams. That range right there is probably what I lean towards on that one. From Dennis, who is a new subscriber. Thank you for subscribing. You are on Dennis Clemens. You're on the fence about wide receivers this week. Pretty firm on starting Worthy. And then I have Keenan Allen, Olave, and Flowers as wide receiver too. I lean towards Keenan Allen. Last week was disappointing, right? We have been thriving off of touchdowns there for him. But obviously quarterback situation is shaky for Flowers. Olave is a very safe play. He's going to get you 10 fantasy points. The upside is just not there. So the difference in floor between him and Keenan Allen, it's like negligible right there. So I would go ahead and go with Keenan on that one. But yeah, Worthy for sure on that one. You're firm on that. And then Keenan is my preference there. Rams defense or the Commanders defense. I'm giving a Rams defense the opportunity to apologize. The opportunity to apologize this week. So I'm going with Rams defense on that one. From Burkham, Warren or Tyron Tracy, Warren this week. And then pick 2 between Warren, Tyron Tracy, Golden, and Tucker. I lean towards Warren and Tucker. It's tough there between Golden. Tracy is good to go, but I am still a little bit hesitant there because I still think that Scattaboo is going to have the more the heftier workload there. And then Golden, I love upside, but ultimately our trust level is just a little bit higher there in terms of especially the ceiling there for Tucker as well. From Belinda Davis, oh, thank you. That's a sweet comment. I really appreciate that. Let's get you going on this one. With Hampton on IR, I only have Kendre Miller or Bashal Tutin to start. Who would you pick? Half PPR. Kendre for sure. So we do have Alvin Kamara that's dealing with a little ankle injury. Says it's not serious. But again, not serious ankle injuries. They're not a competitive team. I would not be shocked if we didn't see him this week. And then standalone value over the past couple of weeks. Like we had Bashal Tutin earlier in the season, showing off nice standalone value, but it's dwindled and it's been the Travis Etienne show here. At least Kendre Miller's standalone value has been decent here. So I lean towards Kendre Miller on that one. I'm going to do a couple of mailbag questions too before we sign off here. What were our mailbag questions? We had one from Samo Nick T on Twitter, 6th place, 10 team, half PPR. And the question was, are we sitting tight on this roster? Have Drake May, George Pickens, T-Mac, QJ, BTJ, Devontae Smith, CMC, Javonte, Tyler Warren, Jordan Mason, Michael Carter, and then obviously, and this is the killer, I'm seeing so many people with this combination, this unfortunate combination of having both Hampton and Benson on IR here. And Then you have Kittle on IR as well. Yeah, this is a really well-rounded team. I don't think you need to make a move right now, but it wouldn't hurt in a couple of weeks because you have Tyler Warren at tight end, and you also have George Kittle at tight end, because the position that's going to put you in is that basically you are going to have to probably flex one of those guys, and you'll be debating it out, but you're stacked at, you've got multiple receiving options there. Got strong multiple starting options there. So you're going to be in a situation where you're trying to flex a tight end, or you've got either George Kittle or Tyler Warren on the bench. So in a couple of weeks when George Kittle is back, or if someone wants to make that move right now, I would trade probably George Kittle or one of the tight ends for sure on that one, because when we're looking at your roster, I think you can make some moves, but you don't have to right now. Once those guys come back, you're going to be stacked, and you're going to want to make some moves on that one. So just anticipate getting ready to make those trades, because you got a lot there to work with. From Sam, and then our other mailbag question from Sam IM. Can you fix the Cubs? And side question, are you a Brewers fan too? I wish I could fix everything in baseball. I'm actually, so you can't see, I'm wearing my Packers shirt, but I'm a Packers fan, and I get this a lot. I'm not a Brewers fan, because I'm not from Wisconsin. I'm from South Carolina. And I know that seems random, is how did you end up being a Packers fan from South Carolina? Well, to be fair, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in the late 80s. I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s. So there was no Carolina Panthers when I was, for the majority of the 90s when I was a kid. They didn't exist. So surprisingly, you would think there wasn't, even when they came on, they're in North Carolina, right? So North Carolina, South Carolina, it's kind of one of those weird things. Like we didn't have a lot of loyalty to the Panthers. They did a good job. I'm not in South Carolina anymore, but they did a good job of like grabbing loyalty in South Carolina. But when I was a kid, nobody was Panthers fans, unfortunately, when they did finally come around. So everyone in my family had random football teams. My brother's a Tennessee Titans fan. I don't know if my dad really claims the team, really, but he would probably claim the Titans. We had family from Nashville. I had, Atlanta Falcons fans in my family, Dallas, Pittsburgh, Steeler fans, uncle that's an Indianapolis Colts fan. And I was the Packers fan because I fell in love with the Packers during my family. Ironic. Of course, I play fantasy football. My family loves to gamble. And so when we would have Super Bowl parties when I was a kid, we would do squares and stuff, and they would let the kids do squares too. And I was like, I don't know, like maybe I would have been like 9 years old. I was like 9 years old when the Packers were in like the 97 Super Bowl, and their square won me some money. And so I was dedicated to the Packers from that point, literally because they won me money on squares as a kid. And I was like, that's my team. I love them. It was like the most intense Packers fan from that moment forward. Fandom wise in baseball, I'm an Atlanta Braves fan. Used to be like massively into baseball, but it fell off once I moved to Houston. But yeah, that's how I became a random Packers fan, dedicated for life since the 97 Super Bowl, and can't stand John Elway. That's my story. Yay. But I appreciate you all tuning in. Oh, and Gwen P said, one more, would you play May over Stafford this week? This one has been a tough one for me. I have a super flex league where I am playing both May and Stafford. So luckily I didn't have to make that choice. Well, because I've decided to bench Kyler in that league. He's dealing with the injury. And then of course he's been like, kind of mediocre in terms of fantasy production. Some of that not his fault. But I have May higher than Stafford this week. Both top 12 options for me. Stafford could absolutely light it up in this game, but also Drake May against New Orleans, excellent matchup too. He's been so solid. Just the subpar fantasy performance last week against Buffalo, but excellent performance from him. He looks so sharp. So May is who I would go with over Stafford this week for sure. Thank you so much. Best ball on call. Then shout out to Robert Walker. This was a wonderful comment. Thank you. Robert said, been following you and listening to your advice since last fantasy season. Out of all the analysts, out there. I find you to be the most accurate. Thank you. I appreciate that. I try to lean towards, reasonable and accurate takes. I try not to be a hot take artist. There's nothing wrong with that. It works for a lot of people. I don't think it works for me personally. I don't think my personality leans towards that. So I try to really emphasize analysis and accuracy and trying to work through things. Process is really the big thing with me as a fantasy analyst. We're gonna work through it and talk through the logic around stuff, right? And then one more question here from Burkham. Rest of season, Tucker, Kupp, or Godwin, pick 2. Oh, you're killing me with that Tucker versus Kupp. Tucker and Godwin. Yeah, I'm going there because I do kind of low-key believe that Trey Tucker might just be straight up better than Jacoby Myers rest of season, right? And Brock Bowers has obviously been dealing with his injury and just not been the same, unfortunately. Hopefully we can get Brock off for a couple of weeks. I need him in a dynasty league where I think I've got a really good chance to compete for the championship this year, so I need him to rest up. Just rest up, my dude, and then we can, push forward rest of season. But Tucker and Godwin are the ones there. Test me on that one. And then Flash Jordan, last one. Should I sit? Should I sit? Last one. Should I sit in this team? Hurts, JT. Should I sit in this team? Hurts, JT, KW3, Scadaboo, London, Odunze, Mason Taylor, Keenan Allen, and Jared Goff with Myers and Christian Watson on the bench. Yeah, should you sit on this team? Yeah, I mean, I don't see any changes that need to be made to this. No, I mean, with Odunze coming through, you're very strong there. So yeah, I think you're good. I think you're good as is. No moves. From Fight Freak Clark, non-PP all, Hall or Warren. And I appreciate you for putting RB in quotation marks because, man, sometimes I have to think hard about which Warren we're speaking of, right? Between him and from Jalen and Tyler. But yes, especially because, Tyler Warren is he's a flex-worthy option, okay? It's not just for the tight end position. He is out there killing it. Love him. I would still go, non-PPR does make it hard because the touchdown equity definitely leans towards Warren for sure. But I would still go with Breece Hall on this one. Yeah, I still lean towards Breece Hall even in a standard league on this one. We need a touchdown. Can we get a Breece Hall touchdown, please? And then from 3PFs, I can't see. 3PTC fail, I think. Better stash. Luther Burden or Kyle Monangai. It is Monangai for me. Again, with Burden, interesting trade candidate. There's been a little talk about what if, DJ Moore could be a trade candidate for teams looking for a wide receiver, right? Because there's just way too many mouths to feed in that offense. So for Burden, I like that they were being intentional about his usage prior to the bye week, but there's a lot for him to fight through. I still lack faith ultimately in DeAndre Swift. So it is definitely in Monangai has clearly ascended ahead of Roshan Johnson, bless his heart. But yeah, Monangai, strong handcuff there. And if he gets the opportunity over Swift, who quite frankly has not looked that fantastic this season, then I do lean towards for sure Kyle Monangai there. But he is a favorite of mine, one of my little late round darlings there. So we'll cross our fingers there for Kyle Monangai, since he is rostered in a lot of places for me, especially in dynasty leagues. But that wraps things up, guys. I appreciate you joining in. This was fantastic live. I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate all the likes and comments. You guys are amazing. I love my audience. Thank you so much. But that wraps things up, guys. As a reminder, this live is a podcast, the Dear Miss Fantasy podcast. So if you can subscribe on all podcast platforms, that would be amazing. If you're not, it's available on all podcasts. You don't have to subscribe on all of them, but if you could subscribe, that would be amazing. And it is through Player Profiler, so make sure you're supporting them as well. So thank you so much. And then, of course, you can follow me anywhere at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME. On every social media platform on that exact username. It was pretty easy to get it done that way. One more question here from Robert. Before we wrap things up, you have David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Woody Marks, and Judkins. Should I hold Kamara in hopes for a trade here or try to trade him now? You think you're good with your wide receivers of London, JSN, BTJ, and Olave? Yeah, and you picked up Mason. Awesome. Which, yeah, because I think Mason is rest of season strong, right? I think you can try to trade Kamara now. You can hold if you can't hold him. I mean, if you can't get someone to bite right now, that's fine. If you want to float him out there, because I think a lot of people have the same feeling of him being a potential trade candidate. So you might get somebody to bite on him right now, or if you can afford to hold on to him and then maybe potentially trade in a couple of weeks as we get closer to the trade deadline and then rumors start to pick up. Yeah, but you got the right idea that Kamara is the guy that you want to trade out of that grouping for sure. And then maybe utilize that. You're so solid at wide receiver, but yeah, maybe utilize Kamara as a trade target and, put in one of those wide receivers and upgrade at running back. That might be an awesome combination. But other than that, that wraps things up. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, I am live every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. So make sure that you are subscribed and turning on notifications. So you can get those notifications when I go live and when I post videos, because I post like 4 or 5 a week. So in shorts too. So yeah, we're rocking and rolling this fantasy season. It's been fun. I appreciate you all tuning in, and I will talk to you again next week. And of course, if you have any questions, just drop them in any of the videos. Latest video is always good, but they pop up anyway. So if you have any other questions that you want answered, drop them in any of the videos and I'll get to them. But I'll talk to you guys again next week. Have a good one and good luck with your fantasy matchups. And I also probably have to set an end screen here before I close things out. But that's it. I'll talk to you guys later.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.